Hello, Seiiti Arata. Do you read books and then just forget it all? Don't worry, if that is the case, we have two tips. The first tip is to use memory hooks to create associations, and at the end of our conversation I'll give you a link with details about the memory hooks technique. But first let's look in detail at the second tip. The second tip is simply not to worry, because the great benefits in reading are just in the way you improve your thinking. The benefit of books is not that you are memorizing facts and information. You do not need to remember all the information you read in a book. It is wrong to think that the main objective of reading is to remember stories and quotes and theories. All this information is already available in the palm of your hand, on the internet, on your mobile phone. Whenever you need a specific piece of information, you can just search online and you quickly find the results. The exception, of course, is school exams, when you cannot check anything online. But now we're here talking about adult life, after school, after exams. So why should you read good books in order to live a better life? Well, what is the point of reading? Literature exists to change the way your brain reasons. After reading good books, you can understand new points of view. You can find more creative solutions to different kinds of problems. So in summary, reading is a training for your brain to develop cognitive capacities. Reading helps you to become a better person day by day. A good read is transformative. You become a better person. The best way to find out if you have learned something from a book is not by the amount of detail that you manage to remember. The true value of literature is when you see a positive transformation in your thoughts, in a way of seeing the world, the strategies that you actually use to solve problems. For example, imagine you read a book called Ultra Learning to understand more about what ultra learning is. However, after you finish reading the entire book, you don't remember all the concepts that were presented. If I asked you about what are the main techniques, you wouldn't know how to answer. Well, in these situations, it's very common to say, I read that book. It is a good book. I recommend it. But I just can't explain the ideas of the book right now because I forgot them. This may seem like a contradiction, right? You read a book about learning techniques, and once you finish reading the book, you think it was very good, but you are still not able to explain what you just read. And this is more common than you think. Basically, Ultra Learning, that is a book that recommends that first we make a meta-learning map to define what this study strategy is going to be like. And then you manage your time with clear goals, according to the amount of time you'll be dedicating to your study, but most importantly, you need to focus on practice. And when you're studying, you try to use your knowledge as soon as possible through specific mini projects to test what you just learned. And always review so you can avoid forgetting. There are many steps to describe each one of these stages, and the author tells many stories about his own life to illustrate the concepts, and all of this makes the book more difficult to memorize. So it is natural to not be able to explain all the ideas without consulting the book. However, if you have read the book well, you will notice that something has changed in your way of studying. Perhaps the next time that you are studying, you will first take a few minutes to plan. In the past, you didn't plan anything, but this time something has changed. Maybe you used to believe that planning was a waste of time, but now you are a new person, you're a different person. Even without remembering what specific chapter was explaining about the importance of study planning, now your brain starts to see more value in planning, so you're more likely to do it. It is changing the way you behave. This is an example of the kind of transformation that can happen, changing the way you think, changing a part of who you actually are. If you need to, you can of course open the book at any time to be finding the exact chapter that talks about the importance of planning and the goal learning map. But you don't have to be doing that. Even without having access to the details of that particular chapter, you have become a person who's more likely to plan. Memorizing information is useful for getting good marks in school exams. However, in adult life, your focus should be different. When we are at school, well, there is a strong emphasis on memorizing information to score high marks on tests. Because of this, we have the false idea that the main function of reading is to be able to memorize information in a book. And that is why we get so frustrated when we are not able to remember all the details of a book that we have read. See, reading is very useful because it transforms the way we reason by acquiring a greater base of references, different points of view that are used in the creative process. However, generally, the exams we take at school, they check how many ideas have been memorized in an objective way. This happens because schools need to be efficient. They need to be objective. Just try to imagine how impractical it would be to try to assess the transformations that students have experienced after reading a classic book. It is difficult to assess what changes have taken place in the way a student reasons, what life lessons a student got from learning or reading a book. It is much more objective to give tests with the same questions to the whole class and give scores depending on how many questions were answered right or wrong. So because of this, there is a strong tendency for schools to be assessing mainly short-term memory. But in adult life, there is very little value in being able to recite information from memory. The internet already fulfills the role of storing information that can be searched for easily. So we need to be able to actually use information in our decision-making, in our creative processes, not just memorize information. To end the frustration of not remembering what you have just read, you need to change your expectations about reading. Usually, memorizing information is only useful for taking exams in school. To get value from books in your adult life, memorizing information is of very little value compared to transforming the way you think. And if your brain starts thinking about other things while you're reading, well, that might be a sign that reading is working. It could be that you're actually connecting what you're reading to other thoughts in your head. Even if you don't remember exactly what you read, the habit of reading will form new neural connections. It will shape the way you think. The brain learns through associations. And to make better associations, you need to feed your database by reading. Despite the advances in neuroscience to better understand how our memories are formed, the truth is that scientists have not yet discovered everything that needs to be known about how the brain works. Every day there are new discoveries in this fascinating field. So when you are reading a book, somehow information is being absorbed by your brain. Some of this information is associated with other thoughts and it is recorded in your short, medium, and also long-term memory. And when you're able to retrieve this information, we say that you have memorized it. We speak in detail about how this happens in the episode 19 of the series Seiiti Arata. But not everything that we read stays in our memory. Some information that we read in books is absorbed by our brains, remains there in some unconscious level. We cannot retrieve this information objectively, which means we didn't memorize it, but it is there. And somehow it is used to form our thoughts. So when we have an idea, what often happens is that some of the information in our unconscious mind combines with other thoughts, forming new connections that change the way we think. And this is a function that our brain develops with habitual reading. So even if you don't remember much of what you read, or if you read a bad book, just the habit of reading, it is still shaping your thinking in a way that almost no other habit does. After finishing your school life, you enter into adult life. And in adult life, the tests are different. In a school life, you just had to memorize information for exams. And as an adult, you are now being tested all the time, but the tests are different. You need to find better investment opportunities. You need to deal with arguments in your relationships. You need to decide about your professional future. All these situations are tests that adult life presents, and you have to solve them in the best possible way. So memorizing information read in books will be of very little use in solving adult life problems. However, if you have the habit of reading, your brain will have a huge base of references to think creatively and intelligently about how to solve each of the situations in the best possible way. The habit of reading is expected to improve your worldview so that it reflects reality more clearly. And with this kind of clarity about reality, you can make better decisions in your life, in your work, in your relationships. That is the kind of intelligence you want to develop. Of course, it is good to be aware of memorization techniques, to remember one thing or another that might be required in your job or in your school, but usually that is not what life requires of us. The problems we face can almost never be solved by choosing option A, B, or C. The answers are much more complex. They require critical thinking, creativity, connecting ideas, and all of this can be enhanced if you give up the idea of memorizing everything that you read. Simply focus on a habit of reading good books that help to shape your thinking. The main point of reading is to shape your thoughts. Even if you don't remember the details of what you read, the habit of reading is still positive for developing your brain's cognitive abilities. If you really need to remember what you read in detail, you can use techniques like memory hooks. But if you need to learn to think better, focus on getting to the habit of reading. So then your brain is always improving. In the Intelligence Arata Academy course, you can have both. Our training teaches memorizing techniques with memory hooks for anyone who needs to remember details in their work or studies, and we also have interactive activities to improve and accelerate your reading. And to see a detailed demonstration of the memory hooks technique, I invite you now to check the link arata.se/intelligence.